We have a very special program today because I have an extraordinary guest. I have a great writer, a newspaperman, a TV personality. I refer to Andres Oppenheimer. Mr. Oppenheimer,
Right.
thank you very much for being here with me. I read you religiously every Sunday in the Miami Herald. And what I love about...
You don't read me religiously because I write every Thursday and every Sunday.
But I read you religiously on Sunday.
Both.
You know, no, I read you on Sunday because Sundays, you know, is the Lord's Day. I read you on Sunday.
Thank you.
Well, I actually get the Miami Herald only on weekends. On Sundays,
Wrong.
especially because I have to get it on
You gotta do
Thursdays
something
also.
about it.
Okay, I'll do it on Thursdays now that I know that you write on Thursday. And what I love about your column, first of all, that you certainly know your subject matter, and you quote statistics and whatnot, the different trips. What I love at the end, you say, and this is what I say, because many newspaper man writes, and always it's in third person, they say this one, so you can never blame him. In your case, you say, this is what I think. So tomorrow I can say, not that Oppenheimer wrote, this is what he thinks. And I think it's very courageous and also very illuminating. So I think it's a very good job. You're the author of many books as well. And, you know, in the United States and in the English-speaking world, Latin America is sort of a continent that has a number of countries, maybe a little more civilized than Africa. They can't name all the countries. They say, you come from Venezuela, maybe you know my cousin in Argentina, thinking that it's a stone's throw from one place to the other. But Latin America is a very complex continent, as you very well know.
I remember many years ago when I started writing about Latin America that in the State Department, they used to have this expression, the ROLA countries. And I asked an official, you know, what does that mean? R-O-L-A. And he said, yeah, because there is Mexico and Brazil and the ROLA countries, the rest of Latin America countries.
We saw that over 20 years ago, the building of the AMIA exploded. 2 years before, the embassy, the Israeli embassy, suffered. And investigation after investigation, and lately we read about this man, Alberto Nisman, and I understand that you knew him, that his death occurred under very mysterious circumstances. What do you have to say about that?
Well, as you just said, he died under very mysterious circumstances very shortly, a couple of days after he presented charges against the president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, and her foreign minister, Hector Timerman, for allegedly helping cover up Iran's role in that bombing, the AMIA bombing, that left 85 dead and 300 wounded in 1994. So here we have him on January 14th, if I remember well, presenting that accusation against the president and the foreign minister, and a couple of days later, on Friday, 3 days later, I sent him an email after I read that in the paper, asking him for an interview for my show on CNN in Espanol, and he responded Saturday at 9:57 a.m. saying, gladly, obviously, I'm interested. He said, quote unquote. Call me on Monday at 7 or 8 p.m. And a day later, his dead body was found in his apartment. That and several other things. The fact that he left a list of groceries for his maid to buy at the supermarket the day after his death. The fact that he gave an interview to an Argentine TV station in which he very, very enthusiastically explained that he was going to add new evidence in a testimony he was supposed to give to Congress. And the very fact that he died the day before he was scheduled to testify in Congress and provide with new evidence of his charges against the president and the foreign minister, lead me to think that it was a very, very suspicious death. We don't know, we may never know, but it's very suspicious.
In a civilized country, shouldn't there be an independent panel named now?
That's what I wrote.
A real independent panel.
That's what I wrote in the Miami Herald.
To investigate what happened. But now,
that's exactly what I wrote in my column. I called several international law experts to ask them for precedents, and they gave me several. One in Lebanon, When the former Prime Minister of Lebanon was killed in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, there was a big, brouhaha in Lebanon, and the issue was very politicized, and nobody knew what to make of it, and it was clear that no Lebanese investigation was going to come to any conclusion. So what they did is create a panel of international experts,
Right.
Eminent law professors.
Will that happen in Argentina, you think?
Not under this president. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm mistaken. But I wrote that a couple of days ago. One of the presidential candidates took that up today and proposed it. But I doubt it. I doubt it because this government in Argentina is, I think they're so isolated, so inward-looking, so convinced of their own misinformation campaigns that I'm very skeptical. I hope I'm wrong.
Mr. Oppenheimer, I think there is some kind of highway between Buenos Aires and Caracas. President Chavez was very friendly with Cristina, with her former husband who was president of Argentina. And some people say there are many things that are being done in Argentina that are similar to what happened in Venezuela. As you know, I served in Venezuela for many years, for 4 decades, over 4 decades, and Venezuela is very close to my heart. And you know what is going on in Venezuela right now, the fact that there isn't enough food, not enough supplies, oil prices that are going down. There isn't a clear separation between the different states in Venezuela, judicial power, legislative, executive. They're not, it's very mixed up. What do you think is going on in Venezuela? Where are we going in Venezuela?
Southwards.
To Argentina?
No. Well, no. I mean, Argentina is still better off than Venezuela. Venezuela is sort of a basket case. It's sort of the perfect example of a country, one of the richest countries in the world, right now with the lowest economic growth in Latin America.
Not growth, it's negative.
Well, the IMF is predicting minus 7% growth for this year, with the highest inflation in the world. So from wherever you look at it, it's going to be a textbook case of how to mismanage an economy.
You know, interesting. We say growth, and it's negative, so that's not growth.
Well, I mean,
I understand. Unfortunately, this is how we use these oxymorons. But there seems to be a lot of corruption, mismanagement, different, values for the dollar, the bolivar, and it all it invites some type of corruption in the country.
Of course, but the most important thing is the one you mentioned at the beginning of your question, Rabbi, when you said that there's no separation of powers.
Right.
All branches in the Venezuelan government respond to the president, and the opposition has very little ways of, it's repressed. There's a very restricted freedom of the press. I would say there's, if with luck, a remnant of freedom of the press in Venezuela. So there's no system of checks and balances.
Tell me, some people say that Venezuela has become a Cuban colony. What does Andres Oppenheimer say?
No, I mean, I think, it would be the first time in history that a big country becomes a colony of a small, poor little island in the Caribbean. I think the Venezuelan government has become sort of a Cuban-run administration because they lack the expertise to do almost anything. And they thought that the Cubans, who have the second biggest economic disaster in the hemisphere, could help them. But you could say that, but there's no question that the Venezuelan government relies heavily on Venezuelan security, on Cuban security, on Cuban intelligence, even on Cuban economic advice, and they've said so. Chavez himself said that Cuba and Venezuela are one country, and current President Maduro continues saying that. But the news now is that now that oil prices have tumbled and Venezuela is in deep economic
What about the rest of the countries in Latin America? What about
the interesting thing now is that Cuba has made a deal with the U.S.
Yes.
And now Venezuela is sort of...
That was done behind the... They didn't know about it, right? The Venezuelan authorities didn't seem to know about it.
Neither did the State Department, for that matter. That was a very tightly knit policy done by the White House, by the Obama White House. And
do you think that was the right move?
I invite you to read my columns, Rabbi. I have mixed feelings about it. I think on the one hand, overall, I think it's done, and the best thing we can do now is to find ways to press the Obama administration not to forget about human rights and democratic freedoms in Cuba, because it's a done deal. It has its pluses, its minuses. I would have preferred if the Obama administration had put some more emphasis on getting at least some concessions on some democratic freedoms in Cuba.
Well, no freedoms are given, just exchange of some prisoners.
On the other hand, there's a humanitarian problem. The Cuban people have suffered for 50 years. The previous policy was not working, so you can make the case.
But you know, Cuba had visitors, tourists from Europe, had from Canada, from Mexico,
1 million a year.
from Mexico.
Yeah.
So there was no really embargo against Cuba. Oh. It's true that had the policy of the United States been different, I think many people would have gone to Cuba as before. I remember my in-laws used to go to Miami and hop over to La Habana for a little bit. We have to speak a little bit about Israel. You know, Israel's on the eve of elections. Netanyahu is coming to the United States. What do you think about his visit to the United States?
I think it's a really bad move by the Republicans in the U.S. Congress, and a bad move by Israel. It certainly helps Netanyahu, but I think it's regrettable that very shortly before an election in Israel, the Republicans in Congress invite the Prime Minister, one candidate, and not the opposition, which is as Israeli and as patriotic and as freedom-loving and as democratic and as Jewish as the Prime Minister, to be with him in that presentation before Congress. I think Israel is facing a big threat from Iran right now, and the proper thing to do would have been to invite both candidates, the leading candidates for Israel's election, to speak before Congress, and not just one.
Iran is a real threat to Israel and even to the United States and to Europe, to the world. It's a threat, I think, also because as there is an advertisement about Hebrew national frankfurters. And they say, we respond to a higher authority, not to a federal commission of hygiene. God supervises us. Well, that's a theocracy in Iran. The most important leader is not really the president. The one that has the real power is Khamenei. And they respond supposedly to a higher authority. So one cannot always use logic or use parameters that we use with other people. Is the United States ready, do you think, that if Iran were to be on the brink of acquiring a nuclear device, to do something about it? In any event,
I think somebody will do something.
Somebody will.
If it's not the U.S., it will be Israel.
And will the U.S. complain?
I doubt it.
Well, they complained about the Osirak, what was the name of that reactor in Iraq. Afterwards, they complained, but everybody, thank God, afterwards, that was not a reality anymore.
Yeah, but that was small potatoes compared
small
to
potatoes.
Iran. I certainly hope that Iran will not be allowed to develop a nuclear bomb.
Well, Mr. Oppenheimer, I want to thank you very much because I'm an avid reader of the Sunday column. Now I have to look for the Thursday column and I have your books as well. God bless you for many more years.
I appreciate it, Rabbi.